Prem2 following up tonight after a critical report came out in March detailing shocking oversights at the WSU Bear Center. An internal investigation was launched after a series of problems, including the death of 2 cubs that were supposed to be hibernating. 2 on your side's Whitney Ward immediately stepped up to look into it, particularly because that center was funded by your taxpayer money.
The WSU Bear Research Center here is one of the most popular attractions on campus in Pullman by far. And honestly, how often do you really get to be this close to a baby grizzly bear? But this center has also come under heavy fire recently, and it's because a WSU committee actually said this facility is flat out inadequate for the research being done here.
It's easy to see why the WSU Bear Research, Conservation and Education program is so appealing. Rain or shine, from behind 3 layers of chain link and razor wire, visitors can't help but flock here, just to catch a glimpse of the resident grizzlies.
They're really cute, and the big ones are just, like, I've seen a lot of black bears, but seeing grizzly bears is just an entirely different story.
A lot of times I don't see them out here, so that's why I stopped today for a little while, because it's nice to see them like out running around and stuff.
They're kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, they're super cute. These ones look smaller. Usually the ones in there are like much bigger. Yeah.
The university has been welcoming people to this fence line year-round since the Bear Center was founded in 1986, the only one of its kind in the U.S.
Our bears are precious to us. They're very sacred on campus.
But what happens within the center's walls is much more fiercely protected, especially after a controversial report was released in March. It detailed, among other things, the death of 2-year-old cubs in hibernation. An internal WSU committee recommended multiple changes to the facility and its operations to keep similar incidents from ever happening again. I was granted rare access to the facility several times as I began to question WSU officials, starting with Dr. Kim Kidwell, Dean of the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences, which includes the Bear Center.
One of the most compelling parts of this report, I think for the average person, is hearing about these cubs that went into the hibernation dens and then didn't really go into full hibernation and ended up having to be euthanized because essentially they kind of starved to death. So what does that tell you? What happened?
It's a tragic loss. You know, I think we learned from that loss, but it was difficult. It was an absolute unpredicted accident.
It happened in 2010. They were placed in their hibernation traps in the fall, and the document states by the time they were removed on January 19th, their health had deteriorated severely. Center records show they tried to treat them for 24 hours, but both bears had to be euthanized. Documents show the 2 were brother and sister named Chester and Remy. WSU's Provost Committee said it happened because bears need to learn how to hibernate, but some at the center disagree.
You know, I'm not sure so much about that. What I'll say is the bears that hibernate in the dens have other bears around them that are hibernating. So, you know,
they're not by themselves?
Yeah, they're not by themselves. And so after the first year when that happened, that was something that was implemented immediately. A bear that hasn't had experience hibernating would never go into one of those hibernation chambers again.
As part of my public records request, I also found this email from Dr. Heiko Jansen, Associate Professor of Neuroscience for the Bear Center. He called for several errors in the Provost report to be corrected, including the call for video cameras in the hibernation traps. He writes they already have continuous video monitoring. In fact, he says evidence that the bears were more active than expected is why the yearlings were pulled out in the first place. Still, no one has ever said exactly why it took so long to notice the bears were not fully hibernating. This also isn't the first time a bear has died at the center unexpectedly. Just 8 months after the yearlings died, another young bear was mauled to death by 2 adult females. At the time, officials called it a tragic reminder that they're working with wild animals. But sometimes the center takes things into its own hands and euthanizes perfectly healthy animals. In the last 8 years, 8 bears have been purposely killed here.
Right side. Oh, good.
Sometimes they're adults, and sometimes they're babies. This internal chart shows all were euthanized either for research purposes or to control animal population at the center, which is only allowed to have 13 bears at any given time. The practice of euthanasia is something the Bear Center has tried to keep out of the public eye. This email obtained by CREM 2 from 2011 shows then director Dr. Charlie Robbins discussing 6 newborn cubs with the assistant director of the Office of the Campus Veterinarian. He said, quote, "Please be a little quiet in that currently I am planning to keep 4, which means I have to kill 2 in the next few weeks." The assistant director agreed, saying if someone were to figure out 6 were born but then only 4 appear on display this spring, questions might be raised and difficult questions might have to be answered. It's important to note that no one has ever come out and said Dr. Robbins' actions led to the death of the 2 hibernating yearlings, but he was removed as Bear Center director in February, pending a full review of operations. So I asked the university if Dr. Robbins could be returned to his former position. I'm told there's no timetable as to when that internal investigation will be complete. For now, his name remains outside the center door, even as a new interim director has been assigned. But perhaps one of the most difficult questions to answer right now is about the future of the Bear Center as a whole.
Why did there need to be a change?
Dr. Nina Woodford now oversees all operations at the Bear Center.
They did identify several action points that we were able to really focus on. So I'm going to be doing that now. I am deeply embedded in this bear program now. And I'm looking really motivated and excited about moving it forward.
The committee's report said the building itself is inadequate for the needs of the center, which only amplifies calls for a brand new 20-acre, $20 million state-of-the-art bear center.
You can see the current Bear Research Center here just over my shoulder. It's that brick building there, and from this vantage point you really can see it's not very big at all. Now where I'm standing, this is considered the WSU Arboretum. The ultimate goal here is to turn much of this land into an expanded bear habitat. It would more than triple the current space for grizzlies, and it would make room for a whole new species entirely.
Now, that species would be polar bears.
The new building would be a far cry from the current facility, which was built in the mid-60s as a primate lab.
And this accesses their runs.
It's even smaller than I imagined.
Yes, so it's very narrow.
Dr. Monica Bando just came to the Bear Center to help develop enrichment activities for the grizzlies. She's also taken on the new role of facility manager, yet another recommendation from the Provost Committee report in March. She tells me a new facility built specifically for full-size bears would make the animals and staff exponentially safer.
Everybody here who works with the bears really cares very deeply about our bears, and our bears are healthy.
And researchers believe adding polar bears to the mix would only accelerate the potential for new findings.
What do you say to critics who cite these examples of bears that, you know, for lack of better term, have either been mismanaged or have died in your care, who say, why should we expand this center if these bears here at this center already are dying?
Well, we have to really balance the health and well-being of the bears with the commitment to research. So we study bears to save bears.
Dr. Kidwell says she would like to see the new center up and running in the next 3 years, but knows it will all depend on fundraising and public support.
I think it's a good idea, but then again, as long as they're handling it correctly, I think if the issues that you brought up can be addressed in an appropriate way, then I think that would be probably a good step.
And leaders insist they are addressing the issues. They've already changed hibernation policies and say there are no plans to euthanize any bears over the next 5 years. In fact, much like the bears themselves coming out of hibernation, the center hopes to emerge from this latest controversy smarter and ready for the next steps.
Animal rights activists have filed an official complaint against WSU for what they call clear violations of the Animal Welfare Act. This follows an in-depth CREM 2 investigation last month that exposed oversights at the university's Grizzly Bear Research Center.
Well, last month I told you how 2 yearling cubs at the research center died when they didn't go into full hibernation. By the time it was discovered, those 2 bears were practically starved and in such poor condition that they had to be euthanized. Well, now this latest USDA inspection report of that research facility again is highlighting what happened to those bears and also details a few other problems. And the activists are calling for the stiffest penalties possible against WSU.
It's been more than 5 years since a pair of year-old cubs at the WSU Grizzly Bear Research Center had to be put down, but WSU is still paying the price. A USDA inspection report completed last month details at least 5 findings of problems with the university's animal research areas, including the Bear Center. I questioned Dr. Kim Kidwell, Dean of the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences last month for my Bear Center investigation. And today I asked again how the program is responding to this latest complaint.
We're going to stay true to the course of the action that we started on when we realized, some concerns that had been raised about the Bear Center.
The USDA's report shows how the 2 cubs were placed in hibernation dens in the fall of 2010, but never fully went into hibernation. By the time they were removed, their health had deteriorated to the point that they had to be euthanized. But the document also details an incident that the complaint called epic incompetence. It was reported in March of this year 3 bighorn sheep at WSU were given 50 times the correct dose of a steroid hormone for 3 days in a row. There were reportedly no negative effects to the animals, but the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee did open an investigation. And there were several other findings that include a rabbit with an injury to its nose, a bent dog kennel, and a rusted sheep feeder that the inspector said could pose a risk of injury to the animals. The USDA asked that repairs and corrections be made within 30 days and also noted that standard operating procedure at the Bear Center has been changed since the yearlings died to keep the grizzlies safer.
As a facility and as the dean of the college, you have acknowledged that there were problems. Are you confident that those issues have been resolved?
I am confident. And what's been good about this is we've been in conversation about a lot of things that we can do or we want to do better. So I'm confident that today we're doing a better job than we've ever done at maintaining a high quality of care for our bears.
Despite those assurances, though, the animal activists say this kind of fatal negligence and incompetence clearly deserves to be severely punished.
So the organization that filed this complaint is called SANE, which stands for Stop Animal Exploitation Now. I talked to the director, who tells me he's asking for the maximum penalties for these infractions, which could be up to $10,000 per animal per violation. But it is now up to the USDA on how it will proceed from here. Live in the studio tonight, Whitney Ward, KREM 2 News.
A second complaint has been filed against WSU for suspicious animal deaths at the Grizzly Bear Research Center. This is the second complaint filed by an animal rights group against the university in less than a week.
2 on Your Side's Whitney Ward has been tracking these developments. She joins us live now with the latest.
Good evening. Yeah, the animal rights group SANE says it has been examining the public records that we here at KREM first posted online last month. I obtained more than 1,000 pages of veterinary documents and internal emails as part of my investigation into the Bear Center. Well, those records date back several years, and the animal activists say WSU's own records raise even more red flags about possible negligence at the center.
WSU's Grizzly Bear Research Center continues to take heat for multiple animal deaths over the last 6 years. Monday, the animal activist group Stop Animal Exploitation Now, or SANE, filed an official complaint with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, claiming negligent deaths and other violations of federal law. It's the second USDA complaint against WSU in less than a week. The latest report suggests inadequate veterinary care at the Bear Center and cites at least 2 more grizzly bear deaths in the last 3 years. In January of 2014, a 5-year-old male, Sam, died of possible gastric ulceration. Then, just 6 months later, a female grizzly, Micah, was found dead in her pen. A necropsy report shows she had a ruptured uterus, which caused sepsis, ultimately killing her. And again, the complaint details the deaths of 2 yearling cubs, Chester and Remy, in 2010. They were placed in hibernation dens in the fall, but never went into full hibernation and virtually starved to death. This internal vet record from WSU explains how Bear Center staff were trying to feed one bear fruit cocktail. It says at the end he was apparently so tired that he would take the cocktail into his mouth, chew a few times, and then quit. And even as his strength was failing, he was still trying to eat laying down, but could not even hold up his head. Both bears then had to be euthanized.
So it's important to note these are formal complaints against WSU, but the USDA still has to investigate. I'm told the agency will likely do a focused inspection of the facility to see if there is any validity to these claims. From there, they can dismiss the claims, they could cite the Bear Center and require some form of corrections, or they could also cite and fine the Bear Center up to $10,000 per animal per violation. Now, when I spoke with WSU officials, they told me they are aware of the complaint, but confident that corrections have already been made. They say it's now up to the USDA on how to proceed from here. In the studio tonight, Whitney Ward, KREM 2 News.